Yo boys, what's going on? Today's video is a little bit different. I'm sorry this took so long to come out, okay? I've been thinking about this video for a very long time now, and I recorded it one time. I had a suit on, I was all formal, I was speaking, super professional and all this shit, but let's be honest, guys, that's not who I am. So, this video is basically my, not necessarily disproving myths or whatever about Native Americans. I'm defending my ancestors in this video. This is what I'm doing. Now, like I said, I tried to record this video before. This is my, including that as the first time, this is my second time recording a video like this. So I'm not very good at this. This is not scripted. This is completely off the fucking dome piece. I'm going to try to keep this as, well-spoken as I possibly can. So I have to edit it as little as possible because I'm a lazy fuck. But without further ado, let's set some ground rules here, okay? I'm going to move my face cam down here. I'm going to enlarge myself. Look at how fucking good I am at editing. I was thinking about having another bullet point on here. But here's the ground rules for the video, basically. I'm talking exclusively about the United States. I don't care what the Spanish did. I don't care what the French did. The English settlers that later became the Americans, and then what they did in the territory, okay? That's what I'm talking about in this video. I'm not talking about no Spanish conquistadors. Don't give a fuck. Now, I'm not disputing that Native Americans were poorly treated. I know. You can bring up specific examples of Andrew Jackson or whoever you'd like in the comments. I don't care. Bring up whatever examples you want. I'm not making moral justifications for colonial empires or settlers being racist towards Native Americans or whatever the case may be. I'm not talking about that. I'm simply, as the third bullet point says, I'm trying to say that Americans or, the English settlers that came before them were not uniquely evil in comparison to other people around the world, because I feel like they're given a bad rap. Manifest Destiny is also given a bad rap. And I feel like it's poorly treated and misrepresented in the mainstream narrative. Okay, my phone's next to me. It might ring. I'm going to throw it onto my bed over there. Don't need the phone for this video. And I'm going to try to do so mostly with math, but I do have a couple of other points that I want to bring up later on in the video. But those aren't what the video is about. The major, the big meat and potatoes of the video is going to be the math. So when you look up some numbers, some things start to become a little fishy, okay? The number of Native Americans living not in the Americas, not from Canada down to modern-day Chile, I'm talking about the number of Native Americans living in the modern-day U.S. So I saw a TikTok of somebody claiming that Americans genocided, like people from the United States genocided 300 million Native Americans? Am I hearing this right? Like, what the fuck? There were 20 to 60 million Native Americans in 1492, so when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. 20 to 60 million in North America. That's the rough estimate. So 2.5 million to 10 million in what is now the United States. Okay? And this is something I want to point out as well, because this number is going to be very important in a second here. There's 7.7 million people in the United States as of 2020 who identify as Indigenous Americans. I feel like that completely gets swept under the radar. These two numbers are not talked about at all. People are like, oh my God, there were 60 million people here. No, there fucking wasn't. There was not. Most of them were in Mexico and Central America. That's where most of the Indigenous Americans actually lived. Now, why do these numbers matter? Disease. I have to make my face cam a little bit smaller for this one. Disease killed an estimated 80 to 95% of Native Americans. The numbers are going to vary by source, but that's the typical range, okay? That number is going to matter in a minute here soon. I hope you know where I'm going with this. I have the diseases, the biggest ones listed. These were carried by Europeans, yeah. But Europeans had herd immunity. We didn't know that we had these diseases. You know what I mean? Because we're immune to them. We're not dying from them anymore because they already ravaged Europe centuries or years prior. So we had developed this herd immunity. Some Native Americans did possess the genetic variations that would help them to survive these diseases. It just wasn't most of them because they hadn't made it there yet. And now you might be saying, oh, well, the Europeans brought them, so the Europeans killed the Native Americans. No, dip ass. We didn't know we had the disease. We're not intentionally like, if you have the flu and then you go up and go cough on somebody with the flu, yes, you gave it to them. But the Europeans aren't coughing and sneezing. They're carrying the disease. They don't even know they fucking have it. So when they come to the Americas, hoping to, settle the wilderness, and we'll get to that in a minute. The Americas were still mostly wilderness. They're not intentionally like, oh my God, I'm gonna go kill all these indigenous American people. That was not their intention at all. At least for the vast majority of them. Maybe a small minority of them did have those intentions, but I'm here to justify that, not justify morally, but I'm here to basically defend the majority of Americans' ancestors and the majority of my ancestors and say that they're not as bad as they're made out to be, let alone them being worse than everybody else across the entire planet, Okay, so the calculations. This one is going to be the absolute worst case scenario for the European settlers, okay? So I have the European population increase from 1492 to 2020, and then the Native American population inside the United States specifically increase from 1492 to 2020, and I've accounted for disease. Now, let's look at this slide. 2.5 million to 10 million. Then this slide, 80% to 95%. So we're going to do the worst case scenario for European settlers. We're going to do the middle scenario, and we're going to do the best case scenario. Okay? So, if there was 10 million Native Americans living in what is now the United States, so Maine to California, right? And then plus Alaska and Hawaii, but I don't know. I don't even know if the source is including those because they're not really what we're talking about here. Because they were largely untouched. Nobody's really criticizing our ancestors over those two places. But lower 48 or continuous 48, highest estimate of how many Native Americans were living there is 10 million. Some sources say 12 million. But that's kind of rare to come across. We're going to go with 10 million because that's what Gemini told me was the high-end estimate. And then accounting for disease, like I said, Europe didn't have these diseases. These diseases had already ravaged Europe. Accounting for disease, 2 million would be left over. Okay? Now, the 2020 population. This includes Russia and the Ottoman Empire. I don't know why the 1492 population just didn't include it, so I made sure to not include it in the 2020 population. I asked Gemini, remove the land in Europe that was in the Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire because it wasn't included in the 1492 population. So the 2020 population, 400 million of the same landmass, okay? And that is adding immigration numbers, by the way. That's adding migration. And I know that's not the craziest difference for the percentage change, but I'm saying it is there. Now, 2020 population for Indigenous Americans, some estimates say it's up to 10 million, but the U.S. Census say it's 7.7 million. 285% increase from 1492 if you account for the disease. And then a 545% increase for Europe. Now, that would mean there's 2 million Native Americans left. Okay? Now, so that one obviously doesn't look good, right? These 2 million Native Americans, what happened to them? Okay, some of them, yeah. They did have massacres. They did have things that were done that were bad. Can I name specific instances? No, but that's not what I'm here to do. A lot of them did die in war, which we'll touch on later a little bit, but whichever one of them, this is the absolute highest, right? It was probably less than 2 million were left after accounting for disease, and 80%, you know, it was probably a higher percentage than that. So it was probably less than 2 million left after disease. But even if you account for that, still a 285% increase, which is a lot lower than this, which would, you know, lead people to believe that there is injustices committed. But then there's also war in which the Native Americans fought on both sides. Let's go to the middle estimate. Middle estimate for the Native Americans, 6 million, right about in the middle of 2.5 million to 10 million. And then if we go in the middle for the number, or for the percentage that were unfortunately killed to disease, that would be 87.5%. So it would be 750,000 left accounting for disease. Now, 7.7 million today, that would be a 926% increase. And that's not even accounting for wars in which they fought on both sides. So that, and then obviously compared to the European population, you know, changing percentage of 545%, that actually looks pretty good. Now, let's go to, this is probably the most accurate in the video. I'm not saying any of these are accurate. These are all estimated numbers, right? So none of these are 100% accurate, but this one is probably the closest to being accurate. Let's go with a completely Looney Tunes, like fairy tale best case scenario for the European settlers. This is, you know, the in the middle for both. Best case scenario, 2.5 million is the lowest estimate of how many were in the United States at the time, or what makes up the United States now at the time. And then 125,000 would be left if 95% of them were killed by disease. 7.7 million today. That would be a 6,000% increase in population compared to only a 545,000 for Europeans. So most likely the percent change from 1492 to 2020 for both groups, when accounting for disease, is comparable. And then you account for war, which, okay, we'll get to Latin America in a second, but when you account for war, it's not as bad as it's made out to look. Is it bad? Is it a tragedy? Yes. Is it this intentional genocide, this intentional extermination by our evil ancestors that it's made out to be by the media, by school, by movies, by people on the internet? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it is absolutely no reason to not be proud to be American. It is absolutely no reason to be ashamed of your ancestors and where you come from. Now, Latin America. This is where most people are getting that 300 million number from. Was it 300 million? Absolutely not. It was nowhere near 300 million. At best, it was like 110 to 120 million. This was mostly, this was 100% colonized by Spain and Portugal. So it has little to no relevance to the video, but I do want to bring it up, because I actually find it a little fascinating. There's roughly 50 to 100 million people in modern day Latin America that identify as Indigenous Americans. 2.5 to 10 million in modern day Mexico. Oh, wait. Sorry, my bad. This is, I read that wrong. So, 50 to 100 million, and then this is, that's 50 to 100 million were living there before. Yeah, sorry. I made this slide a while ago. I was working on these slides on different days. This was one of the first ones I made, so I read it a little bit wrong. But basically, these are the countries in which there are the most Indigenous Americans, and this is what percentage Indigenous the average citizen is. So the average person in Peru is between 68 and 75% Indigenous American. Average person in Mexico, 45% to 56%. I don't need to go through all these numbers, but that's where people get their big numbers from of how many Native Americans there were before European settlement. It was roughly, we're going to say 75 million, maybe call it 85, 90 million. And as you can see by these numbers, they're largely still here. Now, they have some Spanish mixed in, obviously. In Brazil, they have a lot of Portuguese mixed in. I don't know anything about the history of Brazil, guys. I'm an American patriot. I don't know anything about Brazil. Brazil was like one of the lowest numbers, though. I will tell you that. So I don't know what went on in Brazil, but that's not my job in this video, is it? Next slide. So a lot of people have this concept in their mind that, we stole this land from them, okay? It was their land, and we came in and we fucking kicked them out and we stole it. They thought we did this right here. They thought that this was what the Native American cities look like. Not at all. When Europeans arrived in the modern day continuous United States, continuous 48, 10 to 15% were actually like cleared, lived on, farmed on. Okay? 50 to 60% was actively managed for hunting and foraging territory. So it was the wilderness. They just used it for resources. The exact same way that we were about to use it for resources. And the remaining, what would that be? So let's split the difference. Let's say 15%. Let's give them a little bit of a leeway. And then let's say they use 60% as well. So 75%. 25% was completely unfucking touched. Like, they didn't use it for hunting. They didn't use it for foraging. And they didn't live on it. Okay? Mostly land that we still don't touch today. Everglades. Well, as a Floridian, we touch the Everglades a lot, actually. But Rockies, Alpine peaks, stuff like that. But this 50 to 60% of the land was wilderness. And I think it's more productive to be using it for living than to be using it for hunting. And I'm sure they had other places they could go to hunt. We didn't take 100% of their hunting territory until majority of them were already dead to disease, to where, there's nobody living there anymore, unfortunately. Listen, I wish they would have survived. Genuinely and truly. I'm a Christian. I have no ill will towards anybody of any race. It is a tragedy, but we don't bear generational responsibility for that. Let's go to the next slide. A ton of countries are on stolen land. Okay? We need to stop this bullshit about America's a dumb country, it's on stolen land. A fucking shitload of countries are on stolen land. The Anglo-Saxons stole the land of the UK from the native Britons. The Romans stole the native lands of a bunch of different Gaelic people, a bunch of different Germanic tribes, a bunch of different Celtic people, the original Spaniards. The Muslims from modern day Pakistan all the way over to modern day fucking Portugal stole land from people in those countries as well. Now, am I justifying any of this? No. The Mongols stole land from fucking everybody, okay? China is on stolen land. You know how many different ethnic groups are in China? And the current Chinese government stole the land from those people? Most countries on Earth are on stolen land to a certain extent. So that's a stupid argument. And then you're like, okay, well, America did this and America did that. Dude, every country has done bad shit. You're not going to find any country that's just completely squeaky fucking clean. And they're like, you know, the wholesome Chungus, woe is me country that has never done anything bad. Because if you've never done anything bad, you don't fucking exist anymore. And honestly, even if you do bad shit, you still probably don't exist. Most countries that have ever existed in history don't exist right now. Side tangent away. The Muslims, like I said, from modern day Portugal to modern day Pakistan, they committed atrocities. The people that were in what is now modern day Nigeria, they were selling off their own citizens as slaves to other African tribes, to Europeans coming down to give them, you know, better technology in exchange for the slaves. And then you can go on and on. China's committing a genocide right now. The Ottoman Empire committed genocide against the Armenians. Listen, everybody knows about Germany, unfortunately. Now, bad things, injustices are not unique to Europeans. They're not unique to Americans. They're not unique to Africans or Muslims. Every single country does bad things, guys. It is not something to be generationally ashamed of. It's not something where you have to feel guilt for it hundreds of years later. And it's definitely not something to say that the United States is a shitty country with shitty morals and shitty values, or that we're any more evil, or our ancestors are any more evil than anybody else's ancestors in the entire planet. I'm not saying that Muslims or Chinese or Mongols or Germans are more evil than us. I'm saying we're all on the same playing field, dude. We're all on the same playing field. Even the Native Americans are on the same playing field. And I'm not saying that might makes right. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying humanity as a whole has made mistakes. We learn from them. We move on. We cannot go back in time and say to the English settlers or say to Christopher Columbus, hey, you know, we carry these diseases that the Native Americans are going to die to, right? We can't fix it. So we can't be ashamed of it. You know, it is absolutely no reason to not be a patriot, and it's no reason to be ashamed to be a founding stock American. It's no reason to be ashamed to be any type of American at all. All right? I don't think anybody should be ashamed of their ancestry or their heritage or the actions of their ancestors. Moving on. Native Americans were never a singular thing, dude. This is just... These last couple of things are just like, I'm going to quickly touch on this. When you say, oh, we stole it from the Native Americans. Okay, name like 4 tribes, bro. I can't name them. I have them on the screen and where they were from. But the Native Americans weren't a single unified force. You know what I mean? So you can't really say, oh, you stole it from the Native Americans. And I'm not saying that this makes it correct. I'm just saying that this is a narrative that's pushed, that they were a single unified peaceful force when they were not. Like I said, I'm not saying that justifies it. I'm just saying that's a false narrative that's pushed. That's a lie that's pushed that isn't true. Okay? Again, I'm not saying might makes right, and I'm not saying that this justifies anything. I'm just saying that's a common misconception that's used to make not Indigenous Americans, sorry, I misspoke. To make founding stock Americans feel more guilty and hate their ancestry more because they feel bad for the Native Americans, which isn't really a thing. They're not a single unified group. And they never were. Now, you can still, like, I still have empathy. I still feel bad for each one of these groups of people. But that doesn't mean I'm ashamed, okay? That doesn't mean I think my ancestors were more evil than anybody else. All right? Now, this is, I believe this is the last thing. Yeah, this is the last thing. They warred with and attacked each other all the time. So, when this is just another lie that's pushed all the time, it kind of goes hand in hand with this one, that they were never really united. They warred with each other and displaced each other all the time. We just were better at it than they were. Like, it wasn't a 1v1, Europeans versus Native Americans, go. No, dude. Even, so, in Native American wars, they usually had European intervention. After the European settlers, the Europeans usually intervened. In European wars, Native American tribes intervened as well. These are the largest Native American on Native American conflicts. Some of these are singular nights or singular days. Some of these are wars that lasted for decades, but these are just, you know, the 9 or 10 largest ones that happened within the modern day United States without European intervention after Europeans got there, I believe. This is one of the first slides I made as well, so I don't remember 100% of this. But Native Americans were almost always fighting in European wars. Native Americans were fighting against each other. Europeans were helping them fight against each other. Europeans sometimes didn't help them fight against each other. And this accounts, go all the way back to these numbers. This accounts for some of these. So, these numbers of how many were left, this is just accounting for disease. This is not accounting for war. And I know, you know, Native Americans were born after this. The disease didn't just slash the numbers all at once. This is rough estimates, okay? This is very rough, very broad calculations. It's simply to say it was not a mass intentional extermination. It wasn't one big thing. But I think that's going to do it for the video. I'm going to enlarge my camera because I want to end this video on a positive note, okay? While, yes, it was a tragedy what happened to the Native Americans, is that the fault of modern day citizens of the United States? Is that the fault of founding stock Americans like myself who have ancestry that goes back to before the Revolution? Is that the fault of the descendants of the European settlers? No. Do other groups of people in India and China and Europe and Africa and Indigenous Americans as well, do they all have ugly pasts? Yes, dude. Every group of people has an ugly past. But that's why we need to learn from the past. We need to move on. And it can't influence. It cannot influence how you view somebody today. It cannot influence how you view a country today, an entire group of people today. And while I wish it didn't happen, okay? While I wish it didn't happen, it did. But are the European settlers 100% to blame? No. Do they bear some responsibility in their graves? A little bit. A small portion of them do bear some responsibility. There were injustices that happened at the hands of Europeans, yeah. But were majority of them killed by those injustices? No, not even close. But with that being said, the message I want to portray in this video is be proud of who you are. You can't change it, so why be ashamed? You don't have to feel guilt. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you boys in the next one. Bye-bye.